haven't heard anyone's like Louisiana accent before, so I thought that was like interesting that he still has that to this day. And just even the way he cooks, and like I know my family is really good at cooking, and I know like Louisiana is really good for food, and Chicago's really good for food. So yeah.
The style of cooking or like you say, what you want to eat, but also how you fix it is different. I'll share my kind of migration story. Is my grandfather is from Marion, Texas, and the family moved up to Denver, and so he ended up coming to Atlanta to go to school to Clark University. And so when I saw your picture of the water fountains, there was a family story of my grandfather going to downtown Riches and using the water fountain. And he said, that he didn't want, he drank out of the white water fountain. And they're like, well, we can't believe that you're still here, that you didn't get lynched. But he was like, well, I didn't want colored water. I wanted white water. But it was like not colored as seeing himself as colored, but coming from Denver at that time, because he graduated in '34. So this is, so still during Jim Crow laws here in Atlanta as a city. But yeah, so that was kind of this, he was kind of called, at college he was called the Colorado Kid, because of course he had a different accent than the folks that he was around in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting to see just like how my grandpa's from Louisiana, but I'm from Chicago, and so how we interact, like I say car with car or with no R, and we don't pronounce R's. Just like the different race, like he raised his kids because he found his wife in Chicago, and then they got married, and then they had his kids. But it's like he's from the South, and then his kids are from the North. So just like the different interaction with that too, I feel like that's interesting.
Right.
This is interesting because I'm actually plotting in my mind my grandparents' movement now. Pardon me, my name is Dawn Stewart, and my grandfather was originally from North Carolina, and he was a McIntyre. And we have a saying about McIntyres is that if you meet a McIntyre, they are related because they all come from the same plantation, the McIntyre plantation in North Carolina. So anytime I meet a McIntyre, I'll be like, you know the story, right? And we literally can go in our family trees.
Yeah, there's no different sets though.
Yeah, it's different sets, but we can actually, my mother's one of the historians, and so she, I put them in touch. I put their people in touch with my people, and our people are able to plot and see exactly which branch that we're connected to. And so my grandfather was from North Carolina, and he went to Brooklyn, New York. His people were very much entrepreneurs, so they went to New York, Brooklyn, created businesses and so forth. My grandfather was married. They had complications, children, disagreements of who wanted children, who didn't. He wanted children, so he said, New York isn't family oriented. I love it. It's not family oriented, so I'm going to go back down south. And he moved to Virginia. He didn't want to go back to North Carolina, so he moved to Virginia, where he met my grandmother, who's from Virginia. Her people are from Virginia. They never left out of Virginia. And so they connected and had a whole bunch of babies. And so plotting my grandfather's course is like, oh, so, you went up and then you came back down, for your own purposes. But he did very well for himself in Virginia. He was a serial entrepreneur and made a lot of good business decisions, I'll say. So.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
I mean, that's.
Yeah, I was kind of sitting back too I was just thinking about the word migration. Migration is actually a movement, right, of a group, a family. But see, by me being a Tuskegee native, the far as I say I can go, speak about migration is us leaving the project. My grandparents really actually keeping my sisters, her children together, what I'm saying, moving us out of the projects in this same town here, Tuskegee. And we lived right there on Martin Luther King Highway. They had a house. We had a house also right next door, directly next door. The guy who my grandmother ended up, leaving, living, and, they still live together to this day. And I'm 35 years old, and this was when I was a kid. Remember leaving the project. I'm 35 years old, and they still together right now to this day. He had a house directly across the street from his mother, and his sister had a house directly next to his mother. And I was thinking about that. The farther you move away from your root, the more confused and the more hard things will actually be for you at this day and age. Because I remember we moved from this place. It was the same way. We migrated a little farther over, through the town. They had a house. We had a house directly next to it. But we always was together as a family. We were together.
And I love what you shared. This last point is, as you hear these migration stories, the connection of keeping family together. Even if you're going up north, it's for a better life, and you're sending, a niece or your cousin, or so it's like, okay, I'm not just sending you out into the wilderness, but
there's somebody waiting for you.
Yeah, you have a support system, of people from the same area, or even if you go on your own, you're then trying to find your tribe to support you in whatever your efforts are, and that as a Black people is a strength.
Your roots.
What kept us together and trying to find family and keep family together.
And that's a good point, because when you said it, it made me think. Once my grandfather planted in Virginia, his brothers and sisters all came down to the Tidewater area, and so even being there was just like, and you didn't realize as a kid how they moved, how they moved out and about, and then that particular branch all settled in that one area. And you could walk across the street, walk onto the back road, run up the ditch, and there was there was always there was always family, uncle, cousin, aunt.
It was looking out for you, keeping up with you.
And this really is, this is such a particular moment, such a specific moment, in American history. There's been migrations, that's the entire story of this place, unless we're talking about Native Americans. By some manner, people came to this place. But this is really a unique one. So I don't ever want to, throw it into the mix of all the other sort of migration moments. But you think about migration in America today. It seems to be one of these big political issues now where they're saying, who has a right to be here, who has a right to come here. And there are some similarities, I think, with, someone mentioned it earlier here. It's one thing to be in that first wave, and there's a couple waves here. A lot of times we say first and second wave of Great Migration. It's one thing to be in that first wave, to be the children of that first wave. And I've actually got a slide about this later in this. There's a lot of people that we identify with these movements in northern cities that are the children of the people that made those movements. So, Miles Davis we think about like St. Louis. His dad's a dentist from Arkansas. They're the children of those people that had to make that. And there's a lot of fascinating stuff about that the children of immigrants and how they're able to adapt in some ways that their parents still hold on to some of those things they brought with them.
Being so far away from their root.
Yeah. But again, all it takes is one generation, and now it's part of the new roots of that new generation. They're used to living in these areas. We already kind of answered it too. I wanted to toss around, who here is from Tuskegee? Okay, so that means we think about the historical migrations. We all made it here, and there's all sorts of reasons we made it here. I made it here because I was, fortunate enough to get a job at Tuskegee, which is that's an economic opportunity for me. I'm also engaged with somebody that lived in Alabama. I'm from South Carolina. I came a couple states over. That is not any sort of massive migration moment. I'm not fleeing violence. I'm not experiencing any of this, but I also know what it takes to leave and what it takes to say, well, now I'm 6 hours away from my mom, and she was, 20 minutes down the road.
I can't leave like from here to there at the same time. Like, man, we used to live here.
Yeah.
Oh, I got an opportunity. We used to live right there.
And it's tough. It's not the easiest thing in the world. The last question here I wanted us to think about: how do we keep in touch with people even today? I mean, what do y'all use to stay in touch with family?
Social media.
Social media.
Cell phones.
They pick up the phone. When you mention your mother, so it's like now that I've moved, but now we have cameras where I can, I can still keep my eyes on her, and not in a creepy. But I just want to look outside, make sure no one's at the door, and those sorts of things. Make sure she's safe. Yeah.
I don't have children, but I've got some brothers, and they've got some children. I know, just being able to pick up a phone and maybe FaceTime a nephew of mine, or be able to speak to people in that way. I think sometimes we take this for granted because this is another one of those complications of the Great Migration. Yeah, my cousin said he was going to move to Chicago and he was going to write me a letter. Well, he moves up there and stays in the same place, but then finds out, there's a better opportunity in Detroit, and gets up and moves. Or, changes the address and you don't know, and you try to write him a letter and you get back that it's returned to sender. Sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes there's these connections. People are desperate to hold on to them, but sometimes they just get severed. I mean, sometimes you see some of these lines get removed, and again, that's got some weight with it. There's people that are, sad about this. There's people happy. It's just a different world now for us, and sometimes we take for granted our ability to communicate. Back in the day, I gotta hope this letter gets there. I gotta hope that this, party line that I'm on with the phones back in the day, that I have an opportunity to talk to somebody. This is a challenging thing. This is not some decision you make, just on a whim, like, hey, let's see what it's like. There's a lot of things that go into this, and there's a lot of challenges with it. There's also, I mentioned the other part of the immigration thing. There are opportunities up there. There's jobs up there. But now when you move up there, you're moving into a world of, ongoing hostilities. It's a little bit different than Jim Crow, but it is caught up in nativism of, there's hatred against, Italian immigrants and Irish immigrants and Chinese immigrants, and now you've thrown a black population into an ongoing battle for some of these jobs. It's always complicated. It's never as easy as just, we found a new neighborhood and that's that. There are all sorts of ways that you are out of the frying pan and into the fire with some of these movements. So it's complicated. That's just kind of the really only way to deal with it is to think through all of these things we've had to do to move in our own lives. Anybody got any other thoughts on this before we move on? I wanted to.
It kind of brings to my mind a movie that I watched with Danny Glover.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very old show, and the people it was a couple in his town had moved up north, and they were there for years, and they were able to do okay for themselves. And then he came up to stay with them for a while, and I remember thinking, the way he found them, it's not like he just was able to like land on their doorsteps. Not like he had their address or anything. It was kind of landmarks that someone had told him in order for him to find, and then start asking for name, by name. And they weren't, I don't know if they were family, whatever, but it just, it's, on that search to find people when you may know an area, but you don't know exact location, and then those people might have moved. They may have moved further up and didn't send word back that they've gone in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, just.
And I mean, there's examples of it, say you are a sharecropper or you live somewhere, I keep saying Alabama because we're in Alabama, it could be Georgia, it could be North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
You experience white violence, you experience a run-in with the Klan, you experience somebody that wants to take your land back from you. and you defend yourself. You shoot somebody. You might move overnight to Philadelphia, and you might not ever have that same name ever again, because back in the day, you could start a new life real quick. There wasn't, the paperwork was funny back then. You didn't have the photo IDs and things. So there are some people that disappear into a new life entirely. And if a family member wants to keep up with them, they're there, they got away, but there's nothing you can do. So keeping those lines there is always a challenge. But we kind of move past it sometimes to think about there's a migration that way. There's plenty of people that come back. There's plenty of people that visit. Again, I mentioned it earlier just because it's on my brain at the moment. The movie Sinners, if anybody's been able to watch it, is literally involving a family, some brothers that left and came back. And they're getting into, what was it like in Chicago? What was it like where you went? They're kind of being asked these questions by the people that stuck around, and some people are resentful of the fact that they left. So
that's the one with Michael B. Jordan,
yeah,
right? I haven't watched it.
There's just all sorts of emotions that get into this thing too. Sometimes you're happy for the people that left. Sometimes you hate that they left you behind. So it's never easy. It's never. This is a complicated moment. That's probably the best way I know to put it. And again, I just think about, what does it take to move today? Like I said, I've got a move coming up, and I'm going to have to go rent a U-Haul and buy a industrial size thing of Advil so that my back survives the move. It's not easy moving. I don't know if anybody really enjoys this. And again, just thinking about some of the sort of passages that happen here. If you can hit next on that for me. It's not just North. We focus a lot on North. We focus a lot on Midwest too. But you think of the populations in Los Angeles or Oakland or any of these places that we just think of now as having that's a natural, black population in these spaces. Didn't really exist in any sort of sizable numbers in this way. This is a sort of moment where the entirety of America looks different after this. You're never going to be able to undo what this movement means. And again, it's just maybe one of the most transformational moments in the history of this country. It really does shape a lot of what we take for granted as being America the way it looks now. It happens here. It happens over these decades.
Dr. Cohen, are you still on? This is a guest today who's in Utah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still on.
Yeah, so I was just, kind of, do you mind sharing any history on Black movement to Utah?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, good evening, good morning, everybody. a couple of hours behind you guys, and it's 80 degrees out here. Go figure. Right? Yeah. But anyway, to Dr. Candy's point, we use this term, the Great Migration, because this was not the first migration. In fact, we had migratory patterns coming out west in the 1800s. In fact, there's a robust, not large, but a small, robust African-American community going back to the 1800s after the Civil War, where you have black soldiers in particular who came to the Kansases, the Oklahomas, the Utahs, the New Mexicos, and settled, and a lot of that was these were military guys who were serving as protectors of some of the folks who were migrating out this way. And in fact, a lot of people don't know that your first park rangers were African Americans who were part of the Buffalo Soldiers. And a lot of them found freedom because what people don't realize is that as America was developing and growing, many of these territories were not yet a part of the United States. Mm-hmm. So therefore you had a much more kind of communal integration between blacks and whites out here. Once states like Oklahoma and Kansas and Utah became a part of the United States, that's when the racism kicked in. And then we fell in line with what was going on then and what's going on now. In fact, back in the 1800s, we had a Negro League out here in Utah. We had somewhere as upwards of 15 to 16 teams in the 1800s. out here. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize when we talk about the Great Migration is that there have been other migratory patterns. And one of the individuals on the call mentioned their parents who came to Clark University. My parents migrated to Atlanta from Florida by way of Antigua and Chattanooga to Clark College in the 1940s. So migration was not just black folk escaping the racist Klan South, but there was also a migration of the black intelligentsia from the North and the Midwest coming to what we call then Negro and colored colleges in the South. As many of you all know, of the 107 HBCUs, and at one time we had about 240 HBCUs, over 95% of those schools were in the Southeast. Mm-hmm. So you had a lot of African Americans sending their kids down to Tuskegee, Atlanta University, Clark College, Fisk, Talladega, and what have you, Florida A&M. So what happened is you had a professional and intelligentsia class migrating south from the north to go to school, and many of them made their abode in the South and did not leave. Mm-hmm. That's why when the Great Migration took place in the 20s and 30s, black folk then who were from Detroit, Chicago, and New York that sent their kids down south as early as the 1800s began to send their kids, second and third generation, back to these HBCUs. So I'll end there.
I appreciate that. That is actually that's actually where the second part of this is heading in one or two slides, because I want us to think about this isn't everybody in the South leaving overnight, obviously, because this is where the majority is. This also has deep implications for what does Atlanta look like, and the idea of southern cities being reshaped in this moment too, as opportunities are changing, is something I want us to kind of hold on to. So with that in mind, I'm going to move us on to the next one. Again, what we see here is a movement of people. That's the easiest way to think about it, is people moving. People take things with them. They take the culture with them. They take the language with them. They take their art with them. I know there's, again, all I did was come from South Carolina to Alabama, and I know there's things I say that people look at me sideways around here, even with the same Southern accent. They're like, I've never heard that one before. And it's from South Carolina. It's from my grandparents. So, but all of this occurred, this Great Migration. It occurred, and to his point, this isn't the first. Obviously, one of the things mentioned earlier in the call was the idea of exodusters, people going to Kansas, way back into the 1800s. This is part of an ongoing debate about what happens. Where do people go post-Reconstruction? What does this look like? What does progress look like? What does hope look like? The Great Migration is taking place in an ongoing political debate that, oddly enough, we are sort of sitting in right now here in Tuskegee. So I want us to think about sort of competing ideologies that exist in this moment. Everything we do is political. There's no real way around that. I talk to people sometimes that say, I don't care about politics, or I don't want to get involved in politics. Politics is going to get involved with you one way or another, but everything we do has some meaning with it.
Some influence.
We're political actors, whether we know it or not. So, what are the politics of movement in the Great Migration? What does it mean to move? I might have moved for a job, but I might be proving somebody's theories right, that somebody I've never even met. I might be part of an intellectual debate that I've never had time to think about, because I'm not even working 9 to 5. That'd be a vacation compared to some of these jobs. Yeah. What does it mean to be a part of this? So again, I find it fascinating that we're having this conversation in Tuskegee. One of these ongoing political debates that really defines a lot of especially the early 20th century, is this debate between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. That sometimes we'll get into how that's got a little complicated and sometimes a little oversold how different these individuals are. But everyone in this room is probably familiar with Booker T. Washington in some respect. We're in Tuskegee, graduate of Hampton, so trained in that sort of HBCU tradition. First president of Tuskegee. One of those things I hear around campus a lot, and I always have to say, well, he didn't found it. He's the first president. There are other people involved with the founding of this space. And what is it we know of Washington? What is it that sort of defines his entire philosophical model? It's tough to boil a person down into one quick little note. It's tough to say, yeah, this sums you up, or this sums up the way I think. But if we wanted to get into what his vision means here in this moment, Washington really is preaching an idea of independence, of self-determination, of educational and economic opportunity for individuals here post-emancipation. Why is he connected to that? Why is he sort of wedded to that vision? He's from the South. He's been born into slavery. He's seen the conditions that exist in these spaces. He is betting everything. He's betting it all on practical education and agriculture, the sciences, education, training people to go start their own schools, to go educate individuals. The job I was working before I got here at Tuskegee was at Voorhees College, which was founded by the Tuskegee graduates sent out for that purpose. Hey, we need a school in South Carolina. This is how Washington thinks. This is what he thinks progress looks like. Let's fix this space. This is home. Let's fix home. Let's reform home. Let's find a way to make this space work for us. And sometimes it is overlooked that he is committed to this region. So if Washington is saying, this is our home and we need to fix it, we need to make it work for us, are you rejecting that by participating in the Great Migration without even realizing it or really even thinking it through? Maybe you're not considering anything other than, I want to help my family today. I've got this very specific interest. I'm either fleeing violence or I'm looking for hope. You're maybe not thinking about the ripple effects of, am I proving him right? Am I proving him wrong? Am I sort of rejecting his philosophy? Maybe I've never really considered it in this way. I've got a short little video on the next slide that hopefully it'll play for us. The next one.
Moments where Du Bois comes onto the national stage is the brewing controversy between his ideas about racial progress and how to move things forward, and the leading
you try to exit. Is
of
it
that.
Yeah.
Is it in full stream?
Booker T. Washington.
Yeah, it's like too large for them.
In the beginning, they agreed on many points about the importance of education and moving the race forward. It turns out, though, that because Du Bois was northern born and had access to some of the best schools in New England, he really was encouraged to think broadly. It's been part of his elite graduate education, being trained in Berlin, working with Max Weber. By contrast to Booker T. Washington, who was self-educated, a very gifted and talented man, but he was born as a slave. That fundamental difference certainly shaped their sense of change over time. The life that Booker T. Washington eventually led as the leading, most recognized figure of African American society meant that his expectations for what the white race was willing to do on behalf of black people were very different than Du Bois. You could say Du Bois was a utopian idealist in some respects, and Booker T. Washington was a pragmatist, better known as an accommodationist. And so it set up an ongoing debate. Eventually, Booker T. Washington's program sustained the ethos of Jim Crow America because it was about black people working, but on white people's terms. It was about a lack of political enfranchisement
So that was, that should have been that video. Yeah, again, my apologies. I'm not sure why it's not showing up fully on that screen in that way, but,
Hey, Professor, can I make a quick comment?
Yes, sir.
Queuing up your video.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Great. Professor, I'm glad you're bringing up the Booker T. Washington piece, and I must say I'm proud to hold the same middle name as Booker T. Washington. A lot of people don't know that his middle name is Taliaferro, which is actually an Italian name. In America, we syllabicate it and pronounce it out, but in Italy, it's pronounced Tolliver. And one of the things, Professor, I'm sure you shared this with your class, and I'm glad you brought up the fact, because I've been arguing this. I grew up in Atlanta, went to Atlanta University Center, Clark, undergrad, and I've been arguing for 30 years that Booker T. Washington was not the founder of Tuskegee, to your point. and by saying that, we Lewis Adams and the other gentleman, I forget his name, the white gentleman who actually was on the other side of the fence, but understood the importance of bringing an institution of size. So the point I'm about to make is real quick is that one of the things I always tell my students is don't get caught up in the either or argument.
Yes.
It's not, are you with Booker T or are you with WB? It's both and. Because when you talk about nation building, both of those philosophies were very instrumental. In fact, what people don't realize is Booker T. Washington was actually the founder of a lot of interesting philosophies and educational systems in America. The community college, the technical college, all of that came out of the Booker T. Washington philosophy.
That's the year he died.
Fundraising, as we know it, professional
That's the year he
fundraising
died.
was built off Booker T. Washington. One time, Tuskegee had one of the largest endowments of any institution, black or white, in the country during his time period. Also, too, we get in this debate about Booker T and WB, like Malcolm and Martin bumping heads. People don't realize that Booker T. Washington had nothing against liberal arts education. He sent his son to Fisk University, graduated in 1913, studied under the great C.C. Poindexter, then with Charles Henry Wesley. One of Booker T. Washington's wife is a Fisk graduate. In fact, Booker T. reached out to W.B. Du Bois to come teach at Fisk. Right. So we got to get out of this. You know, we got to take sides and then we dig in and bury a hole. But they both had very interesting philosophies. And in fact, I argue that actually Booker T's philosophy was actually more impactful in terms of when you look at it now. Like I told people during the pandemic, when people were, and now people laid off, who had jobs? Those guys who were HVAC, electrician, carpenter. I got a buddy of mine in Atlanta now. We were trying to hire him to do some electrical work at my house in Atlanta. He's booked up for 3 years.
Goodness gracious. I mean, I'm glad you brought this up. What's funny is this is exactly where I'm heading with our slides coming up. This is something that I want us to think about because there's a political argument being made, whether people realize it or not, between do I stay or do I go? Do I try to integrate a PWI or do I go to an HBCU? There's political conversations happening there. But again, there's a lot of connective tissue between these. And I think it also speaks to political reasons that, again, getting into where these myths came from or where these narratives originate, what's the political value in making it look like there's a division?